Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm really delighted to be able to introduce our guest speaker this morning to share her own experience of how to develop digital skills within the ExCo and the sort of board, if you might refer to it as such. Just before we start, I sort of wanted to just give a bit of an overview of who I am. So I'm Lou, if you don't know me, head of our recruitment business here at Crimson. Crimson is both a technology Microsoft Gold partner, doing everything around Power Apps, Power Platforms, all the Azure, lovely cloud services stuff. And that's why I joined the business, really. It made a nice, interesting proposition when talking to IT directors about their recruitment needs to actually be able to have the opportunity to introduce my colleagues also on that journey with customers. So I've been working in recruitment for over 20 years now, started off in London, recruiting for the financial services sector mainly, before moving back to the Midlands where I was from myself. And I've got 2 children, and yeah, just bought a bungalow a few years back, and on the back of a divorce, and I still haven't managed to get my kitchen extension done yet, but I'm sure it'll be happening soon. But I'm human like the rest of us, and love my job, and I like to do the Women in Tech and the webinar events, really sharing good thought leadership, really getting some insights, and hopefully building a nice community for you all, really. And that was the purpose of why we set it up in the first place. Quite a while ago now. We used to do in-person events, but obviously the pandemic pushed us all to really enter into the world of digital more so, and online tech, and here we are today. So a little bit about Crimson. As you can see there, I won't go into all the detail. I've mentioned some of it already. We do take a lot of pride, not only on the recruitment side and the solutions business and the customers we work with, but we really see ourselves as well positioned to provide IT leadership events, webinars, workshops, and hopefully really creating a community of individuals who can trust to share in their own experiences and learn from one another as well. We're part obviously of a £1 billion global group, Nash Squared, I'm delighted to say, and we were at the launch of our digital leadership report on Tuesday evening at the Houses of Parliament, which was a great event, celebrating 25 years actually of that report, which is still regarded as one of the leading reports in the industry in what we do in IT. Some of the brands there, as you can see below, within the group of companies that I feel very proud to be part of, and hopefully some of you have had some positive experiences of working with different parts of that brand over the years. So Women in Tech events, as I mentioned, we like to bring in insightful speakers, and we have very open discussions. There's no judgment. It's very much around sharing your ideas and approaches, and hopefully sort of allowing others in your peer network to really understand that they're not on their own. You know, when we've had everything from imposter syndrome, as I have personally as a woman in IT leadership over the years, and also struggling with lots and lots of different things at times, but most importantly feeling that I can be empowered to be the best I can be, and obviously to share my ideas and experiences with other colleagues to help and inspire if possible. And that's what we really try and do with this network of people. So without further ado, Sam, looking absolutely gorgeous there this morning. Thank you, Sam. I'm absolutely delighted to have worked with you over the last recent couple of weeks, and obviously you've been part of working to support Nash actually as an interim strategy IT director over the last year or so. So I know you've had some close links to our group of companies, but without stealing your thunder, I'll introduce you to the business and allow you to do the same on yourself and your background, if that's okay, Sam.
Great, thanks, Lou. Hopefully my volume's okay, you can hear me okay. Good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and really looking forward to this, hopefully being a two-way knowledge sharing session. I'll give you some of my thoughts, but we're going to have a couple of polls. Love to get some questions and your thoughts on what I'm talking about as well, please. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Lou and Holly, to be part of this forum. Just a little bit about me. Yes, I've just spent the last year with Nash Squared, being their first CIO and helping them recruit their first permanent CIO. I do very similar things. I've been an interim for nearly 4 years now, largely within private equity, where I'll go in and help with due diligence and more NED activity, or be an interim CTO or CIO. But they're very similar patterns, typically going in and ultimately helping with their digital and IT strategy, building the team, defining the operating model. My background primarily is in retail. I spent 12 years at Kingfisher. I've worked at Dell. I've worked in professional services such as Logica. I've worked at Allied Domecq. So I'm very used to retail, consumer goods, but I've worked in many industries, and I'd say broadly the patterns are very similar. What might be different is the pace of change, the budgets, and obviously the people and the appetite for change. But I'm sure as you find yourself that there's a lot of really similar patterns, and it's great to have forums such as these to share them and learn from each other. So that's what I'm hoping we can do today. Thank you, Lou. So the aim of today is my background is primarily digital. I call myself technology agnostic because I think technology is definitely the easier part. Not so much now, as we'll talk a bit about keeping abreast of the pace of change, which I think is slightly unprecedented in technology. But my background is primarily in developing websites, omni-channels. So I'm used to working, for instance, when I worked at Screwfix, we had 6 branches. When I left, we had 650. So I'm used to developing cross-channel digital applications, be it web, be it website. But the bit that makes it particularly interesting to me for digital change is always, well, how do we train our colleagues? How do we deliver digitally quickly? How do we help our customers with the experience and the journey, whether it's Oracle or a different technology? I kind of think they're broadly the same. I know the partners wouldn't always necessarily like me saying that. They have their own sweet spots, but it's very much about how you can coach and train colleagues and deliver the most value out of that technology, which makes it particularly interesting to me, but also makes it particularly challenging and hard sometimes. So want to talk to you today a little bit about how to understand digital maturity, talk about some ideas there, understanding the pace and dynamics of the change agenda. Typically in private equity, there's a lot of pace. I'm also used to a lot of pace in retail, but often people aren't ready to go at that pace. So how do you deliver at pace while recognizing individuals' different needs as well? Who needs to be influenced? Some people need to sign off the budget, but also you need people to be influenced that can actually going to own and lead the change as well to make it real. And what are the gaps? And also recognizing that different members of the ExCo have different awareness and needs. I've worked with some visionary CEOs who have told me what colour a button needs to be on the website and been very hands-on and literally driving the UX agenda for websites. But I've also worked with ExCos and boards who being really open, don't know some of the basics, and it's made it really hard to talk about where we need to be from a customer change perspective. Typically they have big budgets when necessarily they don't understand it themselves, and why does it take that long to develop something? So I've worked in those sort of different areas. And then how can you help? I think as CIOs and CTOs, we play a really big role, not only in terms of helping to make it easy to understand, taking people on the journey, but also the sense check, not just the measurement of things from a KPI perspective, but how are people feeling? How can you tell? I'm very much into the behavior side, whether it's insights or Belbin, but recognizing people have different learning styles. So that's a little bit about what I'm hoping to touch on today. So hopefully that's what you were expecting, but please let me know if not, and I can flex accordingly. So a little bit about where do you start? Before I go through this, if it's all right, we're just going to run a quick poll about where you think you are at the moment, if that's okay. So really on a scale of 1 to 3, sorry, how digitally aware would you say your leadership community, be it an ExCo or a board, are? Be great if you don't mind just taking a minute just to answer that, if that's okay. You should be able to see the poll now. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. So so far, somewhat aware. So very much seems to be the favourite and leading contender on that question, Sam. Quite clearly, actually, I think people feel they're not necessarily very aware. They aren't, that they are aware somewhat, but that's 83%. So it's quite resounding, actually, as a sort of initial pulse there.
Right, a bit more, sorry, excuse me. So, I mean, where I recommend we start, and some of this I know will seem pretty obvious, thank you, but it'd be good to debate what that actually means depending on industry. But first of all, understanding your landscape, and that to me doesn't just mean internally, where are you with your team, your operating model, your tech stack, but also your landscape. So what are your competitors doing? What are your consumers doing? What's the customer experience? I mean, you probably found the same as me, is that when I first started out, people didn't use digital as much. It was still quite new, some of those things. I can still remember using acetate, sorry to admit it, when I was at university. It was all very different when I first started out. So I've got a frog in my throat. But now, as consumers, we all use LinkedIn, social media. We expect everything to use Amazon Prime. It's all instantaneous now. So understand your landscape and what that means for you as a company as well. So always keeping an eye on externally the so what for your customers, but also the so what for your colleagues. What do they expect in their day-to-day lives? And that's really important from an employee experience as well. So that 360 with your customers, and yourself, so that you can actually get that grounding of where you are. And I'll talk a bit about digital maturity in a minute. And then your audience, who are the influencers and who are your stakeholders, are not always the formal. So I'm used to having an ExCo, a board, and then maybe a leadership team, which might be head of. So you know the formal knowledge and decision makers, but who are the people that actually help you land change? Who are the people that actually might influence the board? So that classic stakeholder analysis, but then I'm always particularly interested in their profiles, like I talked about, but also their behavior. So are they naturally inquisitive about change and technology? Do they play themselves? Are they interested in what's going on in the industry? But also, one of the companies that I worked at didn't even particularly use Teams consistently as a leadership team to collaborate. Now, part of that was because they were cross-tenancy across multiple brands, so technically it was hard, but they didn't as a team collaborate in a way that we might expect to share ideas as well. And that brought a different culture. So if we were talking about sharing ideas, it always meant sometimes being face to face, which is quite hard for, I'm sure you've worked with large global companies like I have. So just sort of getting those points of where are the challenges, what technically is possible, but also the behavior in terms of digital. And what I mean by digitally aware is not just, I pretty much hazard to guess now that everyone shops online, everyone's used to different delivery propositions and delivering as a consumer, but what does it mean to them as a company being digitally aware, not just their own behaviours, but also, excuse me, it's typical that the bugs are coming in now, the children are well and truly back to school. One second. I never had a day off sick until I had children, I have to say. I don't know what you were like, but I only started getting something when I had sort of school-age children and nursery-age children. So there's sort of grounding of really understanding. And like I said, from a board perspective, and this is a very time-consuming exercise for the CIO, CTO, or head of IT to really form those relationships and understand how does that leadership community use things, because there's no point going to talk to them about data and a data strategy if they don't even have the right analytics themselves to make the right decisions in the organization. So getting that grounding of, you can see the North Star of where you want to be and where you need to get to, but actually across that leadership team, when people are talking the same language, do they truly understand where they need to get to? And you'll get your own judgment as well. And I always have a bit of a mini scale myself that I know actually, well, this person does understand technology, but actually I need to help them with the language of, everyone says to me, well, what does AI mean? What does low code mean for me? What does it mean to our team? Well, why do we need pair programming? And why do we need such a large engineering team? Because surely AI and low code does all of that now. So it's helping them understand what this, they'll have read the latest article like you have as well, but really stripping it back and that regular engagement as well. But once you've got that sort of 360, so I think we've brought the latest poll up, which is fine. It'd be good to talk about, well, once you've got those, what are some of the biggest challenges you've had? Because I think now imagine you've got your vision, you know the gaps from a technology and strategy perspective, but also you know the behavior gaps. I'd be interested in understanding what some of the biggest challenges with digital awareness. You just said somewhat aware. If you wouldn't mind doing this latest poll around some of your biggest challenges with awareness.
Thanks, Sam. And while people are doing that, I'll just quickly share with you, Sam, some of the reasons that colleagues today attending have jumped on the session, just for your benefit, really. So Laura is always keen to get new ideas to support board level stakeholder management, which obviously you've just covered in some of that just then. Katie's really interested to understand how to mature those conversations on the digital transformation with the ExCo, which is obviously again something you've just referenced there. We've got Anna, obviously keen to just really hopefully learn if the challenges she's facing are the same as elsewhere and not feeling quite so isolated, and some good hints and tips to take away. And as Laura says, often the challenges that the ExCo or the board potentially know less than they think they do. And like you say, Sam, it's just getting everyone using the same language and understanding what that is. And then Claire has joined us today, an independent transformation and change consultant, and looking at how she can build collaboration and engagement across both tech and business leaders to deliver outcomes. That's what she does, and here today to obviously learn. And then we've got Claire interested to see how to help the ExCo not jump on the latest tech bandwagon for the sake of it, and actually making sure that, to your point, they've got that plan and that journey. Where is that North Star? What does that look like, and how do they get to? Great. Okay. And let's have a look at the poll then. So what would you say are your biggest challenges with digital awareness? I'm not seeing the results of that actually. Oh, here we go. Understanding of technology and other barriers, and learning culture, a sort of close second there. So the majority of 58% there for you, Sam, understanding the of technology and other barriers, and then that learning culture, and that piece that you mentioned, really, in terms of that joined upness, I suppose, and how to best get that collaboration. And then just sort of trailing there is the budget and the trading conditions, and then some people have just said other as well, which might be specified, which they've already done. Cool.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the comments in the chat. I'll try and answer as much as I can, but if there's anything I don't get to, either in the questions or throughout, please feel free to connect and message me afterwards. So once you've got and I'll talk a bit about some of those techniques that I've personally used in a moment. Once you've got that North Star, the vision, this is just, there are several, you'll have your own templates. This is just one of the ones that I'm just using as an example to show digital maturity. When I go in and do due diligence, whether it's been as a perm or as an interim, one of the hardest things sometimes is holding up the mirror. Because whilst people might recognize it, it's sometimes quite a hard message to actually say, using an independent methodology, this is actually where you are, because there's that classic change curve, sometimes a bit of denial. Well, no, we're better at this, or that's not true, or the reverse, that actually some people do agree. But that, for me, that grounding is really important to start to take people on the change journey, to get the buy-in, but also ultimately investments and commitments from anyone that you're working with, that there's the willingness to change, because you obviously can't do it by yourself. So people need to understand. And one of the things, so it's come up a bit small here, but you could typically, it's a 1 to 4, any of these maturity assessments, and it's got the classic customer experience, data, strategy, technology, operations, things you would expect as a CIO and CTO. And there's a lot of detail under these that you can actually look at. Where are the team? Where's the technology that actually brings you up a template and helps you facilitate this with the board? But the bit for me that's always of particular interest is the culture and the people. Because you can go in and say that your cyber strategy is not where you expect it to be, or your data or your customer strategy is not where you need it to be, but without the so what of, have you either got the right operating model, the willingness to change, or the right culture for the leadership? It's just going to be an expensive program submission without getting that willingness to understand that, yes, we do need to change. So I find this really helpful. And it also, for me, it sometimes helps you deliver that difficult message as well, that you've used a industry standard template to do a assessment, and then it helps you understand. And what this doesn't obviously do is that bit around the stakeholder assessment that I was talking about, where you'll use your own judgment around actually where are the stakeholders on their own change journey, and being digitally aware as well. But one of the things I have done, just talking about behaviours, is I always work really closely with our CPOs to understand, actually, so for instance, if they've done anything such as behaviours around the board, sometimes there's been a formal, whether it's a team building around Belbin or insights or something like that. But I actually find those really useful as well, to piggyback on those sessions when you're trying to deliver a change agenda as well, because then you can actually really understand behaviours in the room as well. And if people are willing to that change journey as well, that you can actually, individuals can actually help talk about it as well, about, well, actually, I'm not sure about this. This is new for me, but I'm willing to be the guinea pig and test and learn. So it's all about those relationships. On to the next one, please, Lou.
Thanks, Sam. And just on that point as well, I mean, you know, understanding the appetite, understanding where they've come from, and not having to reinvent the wheel is often quite a good strategy, isn't it? And like you say, reinforcing and reusing you know, elements to what a culture is already built off is going to help really validate what you're trying to achieve as well. Makes good sense.
So I've just taken some reports that are available from people such as ThoughtWorks, McKinsey, and the DLR that Lou referenced. And I think some of this resonates with some of the poll and the questions that you've raised as well. That amongst larger companies, just 7% have a top management team where more than half of members are digitally proficient. And what's meant by digitally proficient there is not just being an avid consumer. I bet we're probably all used to those C-suite come to me and say, I like this vendor. I want to put this vendor in. I really like their product. Can you put it in for me? Can you make it happen? Or I've seen this. Can we do this? And why is it so difficult? So that for me is part of it, because I actually really like those stakeholders. Whilst they can be really challenging, but actually they've got the interest, they've got the awareness, and they've got the appetite. So they can be difficult to manage in a different way because they want it immediately and they don't understand why it might take so long. But actually they've already got the interest rather than, oh, I don't see why that's important. So that's where that sort of different behavior, I like the different behavior, but it's that change journey. Many enterprises display a gap between the technology areas where directors are most proficient and the tech areas that are business priorities. So again, we'll always get those stakeholders where some are particularly keen on the app, what the app looks like or data looks like, but really you want to get broad consensus around those top 3 board priorities. And what are you going to be excellent at? And how are you actually going to do that throughout your organization as well? So that's back to that influence, regular check-ins, and getting that board agreement. The complexity and speed of change in this, it does make it difficult now. I certainly find the landscape's very different than when I first started. So even for me, I mean, I'm naturally inquisitive. So I like podcasts, I like blogs, I love communities like this. And that helps me demystify and what's the so what. But I'll talk about some of the things in a moment I've done with the ExCo. I do think the CIO role or the technology leadership role is very different than it was 10 years ago, when it was more about potentially infrastructure and shaping a digital transformation program. You need to wear multiple hats now, which makes it particularly interesting, but also quite challenging because it's quite a broad role now to keep on top of. So I think one of the things I found really useful is having those people in your team as well, either in your extended team or in your own technology team that have got that natural appetite as well and can drive that for you and with you. One of the things we'll touch on in a moment is, have you got the right access to that formal and informal community? Some people that I sort of network with still have quite formal C-suite relationships where they have the monthly governance update to talk about budget and deliverables, don't necessarily have those really important informal, can we grab a cup of tea, can we build those relationships, and don't necessarily have the right access, and that does make this hard. I think it's getting a lot better, but certainly we've seen recently in the DLR that was launched this week, today in fact, that actually CIOs still need the right access, and that's still, and it's getting better, but it's still not where we need it to be. And digital leaders have a big role in that. Lou, any questions I've missed at the moment? As we go on to the next poll?
Not yet. I was just going to ask actually, because I know Laura was nodding her head in agreement of some of the things she was saying there, which I don't know. I hope you don't mind me pointing to you, Laura. But do you have any other challenges or opportunities that you've seen yourself as obviously doing the role that you do, which is similar to Sam, or was there anything in there that really resonated with you, Laura? Do you mind me asking?
No, it's really interesting that I struggle, particularly in the organisations I'm working in at the moment. They're all owner entrepreneurs, and actually the grind of monthly governance reviews it's very negative. They don't enjoy it at all. Everyone else gets a lot out of it, but the kind of the senior chairman and the chief exec, you know, they're always yawn, yawn, yawn. So so that resonated with me. I did have another question, but shall I save that, Lou, or do you want me to ask that now?
Yeah, please do. Let's use this opportunity. So give Sam's voice a little break for a sec. No, please do.
I think it's, I wanted to ask you, particularly when you've done some of your due diligence work with, you know, private equity companies, there seems to be a fixation in some of, particularly the NED community, on creating fin organisations, and I don't know whether you've come across that a lot, and it comes from a place where I think it's excitement about creating value in companies, but it often comes from a place where I just don't think they really understand what they're getting into, and I wondered if you come across that and sort of had to deal with that at all.
I have to apologise, Laura. As you said, something organisations, that blocked out for me. I didn't hear the first bit of the. Sorry.
Owner managed organisations, I said.
Right.
So people that have set up
Yes.
their own business and have grown, and, you know, are very passionate about them, and quite often quite bonkers as well.
Yes, I have absolutely. Yes, yeah, I have. Yeah, I have seen that, and I think again those dynamics are really hard because it's their baby, and that's to some extent they obviously want the PE backing because it's helped with the growth plan and the value creation plan, and I mean, yeah, being really candid in this forum, sometimes I've seen the owner then leaves or becomes a silent shareholder, because it is quite hard to take it to that next level. And obviously you want to, often they're the visionary, they're the creative, and you want to keep them involved, but it's almost like taking it to that next level. So for me, it comes back to those behaviours and a little bit understanding who the decision makers are and who you need to take along that journey, because often the private equity, you hopefully have been taken into the confidence to say, yes, they are here, but this is their role. And they're only now one voice of many. And it is hard because typically I've had that a couple of times in the last couple of years, that the colleagues are there because of that visionary owner. And it's even harder to take them on that change because you've got the private equity who now are trying to some extent, make it more corporate in a small way to do some of those things that you're talking about. So, you know, I empathise, and it's probably a discussion in itself, but I've definitely seen that.
Thanks, Laura. Really appreciate that question. Always count on you to come in with something really from the heart, really, because you've got loads of experience yourself, like Sam, which is great. So thank you. So we've just done another poll. So I don't know whether all of you have seen that. So do you have access to the right community to influence? Obviously really important in terms of how you go about this. So yeah, most of you who have just completed that poll, thank you, are 77% saying yes, they do feel they've got you know, influence with the right community. Do you have access to it? So that's a good thing, right? So we're obviously in the right place there with that.
I do encourage you, if you're not doing this already, because there's, like I said, there's the formal access to the formal board and the formal governance that you've talked about, Laura. And I've run so many of those forums. I ran a really large portfolio budget, and sometimes they've ranged from $1 million to 100 million. And no matter the size of the budget, it's always quite difficult prioritizing. So you need to do the lineup and, again, understanding your stakeholders. But I prefer having formal forums where you have to do your board due diligence and your presentations. But then for things that are slightly more creative, where you're looking to influence, I do those as separate forums. So either a lunch and learn, or a quarterly roadmap session, or a demystifying tech session. I try and get as many guest speakers as possible. I try and get partners involved, so it's not just me talking about it. So whether it's Microsoft or other partners such as that, obviously heavily setting up the partner that it's not a pre-sales opportunity with the board, it's about building longevity and relationships. But I find those guest speakers, the other bit about influence that for me is really important, it's not always the obvious people that influence. So I've worked with people, for instance, who are web designers and great UX, who had a fantastic relationship with the CEO, and so they would be the one, or innovation forums that, or back to the floor forums, or operational trading forums. So often they're the people that actually have got the voice that you need as well. So it's really understanding, when you look across the organization, who can you build those relationships? So it's not just you influencing as well, it's someone who has got a fantastic customer relationship. that can come in and talk to the board with you about why this is really important and talk about those behaviours. So I encourage you to think about those formal influencing opportunities and informal. It's not easy, all of this. Like I say, it's really time consuming, but hopefully that's where some of you get the passion from.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. That's a really good hint, actually. And I think identifying who those change agents are and those people that can be your advocates and really drive that message is crucial in all different levels, really, of business. So great point.
And just again, I've sort of recapped on this a bit as well, that I don't think anyone can dispute now about the importance of technology, digital, and change. But it's about their role, and sometimes hopefully they'll be quite candid with you about how can I help. I often have that conversation in a forum where someone will say to me, what role do you want me to play? The CFO, ultimately it's his role to sign everything off with the CEO, but do you want me to be a challenger? Do you want me to be a supporter? Do you want me to ask the silly questions? So by building that relationship, you can really get those supporters with you, so it doesn't feel lonely. I think sometimes when you join a new company and sometimes you're saying things, it can feel a bit isolating unless you really build those relationships. And this takes time. It doesn't, there's a reason people talk about a 100-day plan, because whilst you can deliver results and make a difference in 2 to 4 weeks and your personality will shine through, to truly see those results, I still think takes typically 3 to 6 months. And that's hard in a PE world. But that's why people talk about a 100-day plan. So on to the next slide, please, Lou.
Okay, so I'm on this. On this transformation approach. There we go.
Just some examples that I've touched on, but I'll just sort of recap on. So understanding the company values, I often find, I was part of a panel recently where we talked a little bit about, it was actually about attracting digital talent, but we talked a bit, one of the things I emphasized was about company values, about integrity. So part of that, your role might not just be about the technology and the change management side, it's being authentic and showing that integrity, and hopefully the community you're working with does that as well, because we all know the companies that publish the values, but actually do you feel that diversity is there, or that people can test and learn, or it is a safe community? So sometimes our role is to be a bit open as well, to say that, look, I know what we need to do, but actually we're not necessarily leading by example and showing those values. That's not an easy thing to call out, by the way, but that's part of our role as well, to be part of that community. I'm a big fan of piloting and testing and learning. So let's talk about AI. Everyone wants to make sure they've got some kind of AI presence, but do you need to have some kind of AI presence at the moment? Is it relevant to you? I do believe everyone should be aware of it. And I recently did a tech talk talking about it, helping people understanding with an exec leadership team, so people understood what the terms meant and what the language meant and what the so what meant. Because even when you look, for instance, at the Gartner reports, the top 10, even that sometimes use languages. It's like, well, what does this actually mean? So I do quite a lot of those regular sessions for people to understand what it means. But then I bring it back to, so what's the relevance for us? So more recently, working in professional services, we were looking at co-pilots and productivity improvements. So there's a lot of relevance there, regardless of industry. So if you can bring some of that tech back and it's relevant, I think you need to be clear on the hat you're wearing, that it's either an awareness hat to say, I know it's out there, it is important, I'm going to bring it back to you every period of time and talk to you about it, but at the moment we're going to put it on our backlog, or we're going to test it. We're going to pilot it. I'm going to get a group of people together. We're going to test it. So just understanding what you're going to do, but don't lose sight of it, because otherwise I think people will think, well, where is it on our agenda? It's great to always talk about cyber and what we're going to do with our cloud transformation, but are you covering the spectrum of things? I touched a bit on the demystifying. Find the right learning style. Some people love blogs, some people love guest speakers, some people love playing. So I love creating sandboxes, getting the right developers to have a community and pilot things, but find your member on either the C-suite or the leadership team that likes doing that. It's always much better when you can get a colleague talking about it for you or with you rather than you just talking about it. Measurement's really key, and not just the formal KPIs of has it improved productivity, has it improved conversion, has it increased margin, what's it done for my gross revenue, all of those things, not just the formal measurements, but what's it either done for my employee engagement score, what's it done for improving awareness, what's it done for the behaviors I expect. So develop those more informal ones yourself, or agree them with your CEO or leadership team to say, what am I actually trying to measure here? One of the things I always love is when I start talking to people about things and they're either very excited or they might be a bit cynical, but then maybe in a few months' time, they're telling me about it as if I never talked about it. And it's quite seamless that people are telling your story. I always find that quite powerful. That's one of my own measurements. It's not necessarily people saying to me, Sam, that was really helpful, you did that, but it's actually them telling the story as if it was their own. I love that when that happens. That for me is always a really satisfying thing for me. That's one of the things I love. Just going on to the next slide. So I touched on some of this, and obviously emphasizing the human part, the people part around the technology. Let's use AI as an example. I find it hugely exciting, slightly terrifying, some parts of it as well, because of the unknowns. You've seen a lot of the forums recently. Our role is also to do some of those things that aren't seen as some of the potentially the less interesting parts. But what's your policy around it? Where's the data going? Are you putting company data in ChatGPT? Because I really don't want you to do that. So it's sort of looking at that side as well and being the custodians, working with your CDO or CISO or whoever there. But so that's part of the demystifying technology as well. I've talked a bit about explaining the relevance. I really like the when I've worked in retail more, I've done a lot around store of the future, helping people touch things, play with things, have different user interfaces. I've done visits to competitors. So if you always have that, when I first started working in retail, we would look to Amazon, who at the time people were a bit, what's happening with Amazon? But we would look at them for our customer journey. So finding those ones that actually might seem a bit wacky or bonkers because they don't apply to your industry, but they might be the ones that come up with the gems, and just getting your board to think in a different way rather than it being you talking about all of the time. You'll find your right cadence. I find quarterlies work quite well. And then in between, setting up some kind of community, a Teams channel, or just another way to consistently share. And again, it's always really satisfying when it's not just you posting the latest article or have you seen this, talking about it. And then I've always been lucky enough to set up some form of innovation forum. Sometimes it's been quite small, sometimes it's been quite big, where that community, and it's been cross-functional. So had finance, HR, representation from all forums, not just technology, to talk about what innovation means to us, and not just technology innovation, but process. How can we improve this process? How can we launch this change management initiative? But that collaboration really helps. And then if you've got that kind of forum, you can use that forum to test and learn, and again, help with your influence and story. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Sam. I'm just going to jump in for one moment, and I know Katie asked the question how to mature the conversation with the ExCo, which we've obviously sort of covered off a lot there. And Katie, just sort of touching on what you said earlier in terms of what you're keen to know more about, and knowing that you're obviously 6 months into a new role yourself in an IT director role with a new organisation in a different industry to where you were before. Does some of that resonate with you, or have you got any questions specifically for Sam?
No, it's been brilliant content actually, because it's come just at the right time. I've had that dilemma going on at the moment in terms of we've got a board that has a very formal structure to it, but actually do I set up a kind of another digital governance, but have always thought of that as being a bit boring as well. So these ideas of lunch and learn and sort of technology forums have been going a bit through my head, and it's actually really helpful to see quite a succinct framework almost to some of the things I can probably take straight out of here and get going with. So thanks.
Well, thanks, Katie. And I thought that might hit the chord
very
with you,
much.
strike the chord with you. Great.
I think, and this is where I was talking about that community that I've always worked very closely, not just with the CEO, but the CPO, that having that culture of learning, that this is a continuous, like I've talked about some of the basics, that have you got the right platforms in place to collaborate and share information, and have you got the right L&D for people to learn about things, and those sound bites, because that all helps implement and lead change. And back to those values, that have you got the right support and encouragement and time. Quite frankly, time's one of the biggest things I found hard in organizations, even very small, sort of 50 million turnover, or I've worked with 12 billion turnover, but time is always a pressure because people are busy trading. But that's where I come back to that, fostering a culture of learning, that people, firstly, they've got that own, they want to learn themselves, they're inquisitive, they want to find things out, but also that people have the time to do things, which can be a challenge. But if colleagues are inquisitive and actually want to do the continuous improvement themselves, they've heard about something, what's the right forum for them to either be coached and to share ideas? But this, for me, the ExCo and the board are a really key part of this, but they need to demonstrate that themselves, and sometimes being really open and candid to say, actually, we're learning ourselves, we don't know the answers, but we need your help. So being a bit humble as well, because if it's not open and you think, actually, well, I'm the only one that doesn't know this, and it's a bit of a scary place. But actually encouraging people to be open, and that's where, again, where I quite like the guest speakers, people talking about the change journey they've been on, but just trying to foster that culture of learning. And obviously you can lead by example with your own team, and you can influence, but having those colleagues that can do that with you makes this really powerful to share those best practices. So really, just to sort of summarize on some of the things that I touched on today, I'm really keen on the being innovative where it's appropriate, but testing and learning, whether that's really small things, say sort of working with a partner to say, I've seen that you're doing this, I'd like to have a sandbox and test some of that, but I'd also like to involve some wider colleagues to understand what that means. Sort of having that openness, that willingness. And then I often do show and tells with the board, and again, I do that with my own. My favorite is when my team does that, whether that's and that can be quite a scary place to be sometimes, because if you're used to quite a polished, formal environment and you've suddenly got an engineer presenting, it can be quite nervous for them. But also, sometimes they do speak a different language, but you really don't, it's much better if you don't really have back to not having those formal forums, to be able to do them in other forums. So to test and learn. I can't emphasize the importance of doing a formal, even if it's just for you, assessment of the maturity of the board and where you are, and that 360, because it helps you with your plan, your priorities, and even if it's not part of your formal ask to the board, it helps you understand, how am I going to map that journey? What help do I need? And what help do you need as an individual as well? We never stop learning. That's why forums like this are great. You might need different support than you've got formally in the organisation. So that for me is really important. I've talked a bit about the culture, so recognising part of the opportunity and challenge. How do you take other people on the journey? How can you get other people to help you? What's the readiness for change? Be really flexible and responsive. I've been guilty myself of going in with, this is the plan, this is what we need to do. Feedback I've sometimes had is that because I'm very good at having a North Star, make sure I don't go 1 to 10. Make sure that you take people on that looping back all the time, that people understand, recognize the people that aren't necessarily there, and the classic change curve, but adapt your approach. Have a few different tools up your sleeve that you can do different things. So don't be rigid in your approach, because things change frequently. There's many unknowns, and people are people. So be really flexible and test things. And then measure the formal measurements. I'm always a little bit surprised when I go in and still boards have the formal KPIs, like I say, that they might use with private equity, but they don't have the right operational KPIs, and they're not used consistently amongst the right forums. But also agree how you're going to check progress, and that might be like I said, some really informal things that you agree yourself, but check that progress regularly and tweak it yourself as well. So I'm going to pause there, Lou, to see if there's anything that I've missed or any other questions. Or
Sam, you've just got it's so natural, isn't it? You've obviously got all this experience that oozes out of you, and obviously, I mean, my first observation is just how effortless actually you make it seem, which I know is not easy, and I know you've got years of experience of probably banging your head against brick walls as much as you have sort of, you know, championing stuff. But honestly, it comes through as so natural because you really have the heart and minds piece going as well throughout everything. So you've got the formality, you've got the structure, and I think the big takeaway for me is, you know, regardless of what the mandate is going in and what level of role and how many chiefs there are possibly, that maturity assessment of the team and using a template to just do that assessment on a business to really enable them to see their own perspective on things and differences of opinion from their peers when they all sometimes think they're on the same page. I think that's a real big takeaway actually, as well as the cultural piece around working with the people team to understand what has been done before, what do we know about our leadership already, you know, etc., what tools have we used in the past, rather than having to always reinvent the wheel and kind of come in with all these great new ideas when half of it's already been done. You've just got to remind people why they've done that. And I think for me, the last thing is and something I've always taken a lot of time to do is those informal sessions, is those sort of in the moment, in person, and sort of what we used to call the water cooler moments, because, you know, lots of people in the sales sort of environment that I work in, you know, it's all about that praise and recognition and that feedback, but very much that informal sort of well done's or discussions, rather than everything being quite formal and quite structured. So like you say, depending on who your advocates are. So that's my sort of key takeaways. Thank you, and it came across brilliantly. Has anyone else got any questions for Sam? We've got a few minutes, and obviously I know we've all got busy lives and busy days ahead, but just really obviously to take the opportunity to say thank you, Sam. But has anyone got any questions in addition to what you've already covered, or anyone want to share anything themselves? Don't be shy.
I'll ask
one thing.
sorry,
Hello.
Oh no, Vanessa, go for it. Go.
Hello, Vanessa.
Morning. So I was invited onto this, and I'm coming from a totally different perspective. But one of the challenges I have is trying to get a foot in the door with boards to explain that tech and cybersecurity is just so very important. But often the door isn't open, and I'm not too sure how to open the door. Any hints or tips?
I have been there, so I empathise. I do think positioning of our roles is really key. Is there anyone else that can influence for you, just to start to build, to bring you in and potentially think about, once you can sort of understand potentially the individual's interest, because it is quite hard. I mean, everyone using cyber, it's top 10 or top 3 for any organisation, but it can also be a bit dry to get that foot in the door. So it's have a think about other things that they're interested in. So understand either the risks. Risks are always, I know that's linking back to the cyber, but what are they either thinking about competitors? Are they either thinking about different revenue opportunities? Are they particularly interested in other industries? So what might their sweet spot be that you can actually say, look, I found this out that our competitors doing this. You might need to try a few different techniques, or I found this out, this might be of interest, and being really candid, you might need to try several different, this is back to the time, several different times. So I have had that previously, and it takes time. It does take time, and then you'll be delighted, and then you'll be, eventually you won't have enough time to do all the updates you'll be asked to do, but just try different openers with different people, really.
Thank you. The one I hadn't tried was the competitors. I'll give that with some gumption. So thank you.
I think for me as well on that point, you know, absolutely the competitors, you know, any sort of healthy and competitive and motivated organization will always listen when they start to hear what someone else is doing right out there. So that's a really big takeaway that I've always had as well. But finding those individuals who aren't necessarily the obvious ones, like you said earlier, Sam, and yes, to have influence in your management and someone to give you the autonomy or to open the door for your autonomy in your role is really important. But you know, sometimes there's some really hidden gems within the organization. For us at Crimson, there's been people who have come from the business side, not tech, and they've been sitting in a housing and a association and a council before, and they've come into the consultancy piece, but they really can understand that heart and mind of the customer's perspective, and really trying to find those types of ambassadors and advocates can sometimes help open up those doors as well. Laura, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to ask it. I mean, it's very difficult. I can imagine. I'd love to come to one of your lunch and learn sessions that you're very passionate about it and people will engage with you. But I always find it quite hard to find the right people like the engineers who are willing to share things with you. Is there anything in particular that's worked well for you to do that? Because as you quite rightly say, it's very time consuming to go around and talk to everyone in the organisation as well.
I think that's why I run them, because you'll never, attendance will always be mixed depending upon priorities. So that's why I get so for instance, I'm used to running quite large agile teams. I would always have a monthly, I'd have the end of iteration show and tell for people looking at the actual product, but I'd always have a monthly show and tell at the same time every month so that everyone could drop in and come. And sometimes you would get great representation and sometimes you wouldn't. I did have to do a lot of coaching with engineers and often I would involve product owners and business analysts to do a lot of the presenting to make sure that we were talking about customer experience and not necessarily always the tech layer. So knowing that your audience, which is again a great development opportunity for your engineering teams as well, because you need to be able to gone are the days when engineers sort of sat in a cupboard and didn't get out much. Hopefully that doesn't exist so much now. But I think it for me is really trying different approaches, different. I did often find that the engineers didn't want to always speak to do big presentations, so it was finding the right forum for them as well. That sometimes if it was like a smaller 20 people versus I've run 800 people safe rollout, so that could be quite daunting for anyone, regardless of what experience you've got. So I think it's coaching, finding the right forum, finding the right content, and making it. I think anyone can feel, if it's the right content, anyone's got that passion to talk about it, but making it feel safe for them. So yes, I hope that helps.
Thank you.
The one thing sorry, I was just saying, one thing to potentially end on is I've always been really lucky that I've always had a sponsor, a coach or a mentor, either within the organisation or externally, that frankly has helped keep me sane. Whether it's personal coaching or just a sounding board, and often I've been lucky to have one within the organisation and externally as well. I just think that, and it's stating the obvious, but it's like forums like this, it just really helps.
It really does, and I'm a big ambassador of understanding that you need to be able to sound things off with people, to sanity check in, and especially as you mature through your career and personal life as well. I think it just gives you that comfort factor and reassurance and confidence to sort of go again. And often, you know, you absolutely know it all, and you know you're on track, but someone to check in regularly to help you. I think for me, it's been around understanding your own vision, your own personal journey, because often when we're rolling out all of these fantastic solutions and relationships that we're looking to build with colleagues and customers alike, that's all very well said and good, and you're focused so much on others, but actually having that clarity of mind and that vision of your own purpose, both on a personal development as well as your sort of role that you're doing, I think is also really important. And like you say, Sam, a coach or a mentor can often help you stay on track with your own personal development as well, which helps then other people feel inspired and on your journey with you, because they're more likely to respond well to that if they can see that you've got a clear focus as well. Fantastic. thank you. Really fantastic presentation today, Sam. Really came together brilliantly and just so passionate. And I know you were keen to have less about the slides and more about just bringing all of that experience and knowledge
Thank you, everyone.
all those hints and tips, which absolutely worked for me. Thank you so much. If you want to keep in touch, obviously we'll connect with Sam or connect with us at Crimson if you need any support with recruitment, resourcing, or just to see what next events we've got coming up. Please don't hesitate to contact us. We run regular events. We've recently done some safe and agile forums as well, which has been quite insightful for a lot of our customers. And obviously our solutions side of the business do a load of very focused industry specific work. So whether you're in housing or house builders or wherever industry you're coming from, it's more than likely that we've got something for you. So please do keep in touch and use this forum, those of you that are on it, to connect with one another and really get to know obviously some good peers in your industry. So Sam, thank you so much. It was really brilliant. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you all.
And I'll say thank you on behalf of everyone and have a good day.
Have a good day,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
And keep in touch. Good luck.
Thanks for
Bye.
joining. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.